Good evening and welcome to you wherever you are. Maybe you're on your way back from work, maybe you're on your way to work, maybe you're at home, maybe you're in the park. I hope you're doing something lovely. I am Damian Barr and this is another one of our very first Facebook Lives on our salon page, which we're very excited about. We feel very modern. We're using a tablet, we're using a phone, we're using all the things. Today's Facebook Live is with the lovely Ella Bertou.
Hello.
Ella, who's wearing a gorgeous watermelon applique garment. And we've accidentally matched pink on pink.
Yes, very happily.
Including my pink sunburnt Scottish skin, because I was in a park in Hove today, but ill-advised. But anyway, thank you for joining us wherever you are. A few wee bits of news before we get to our discussion today, which, by the way, is going to be about the art of mindful reading. So start to think about bibliotherapy, start to think about mindful reading, what it is and what it isn't. I think we have to talk about that too, don't we? But before we get to the hard substance of today's deep and meaningful discussion, a few bits of salon news. Now, there hasn't been a salon at the Savoy for a while, and you might be feeling neglected, and it's true that I'm feeling sad.
I'm very sad.
I'm sad we haven't had one for ages.
Yeah.
There is a reason. Well, when's the next one? Thank you for that nice egg, Ella. Well, there hasn't been one because the ceiling fell in. Did you not know?
I did hear something, yeah. Pretty crazy.
The ceiling fell in on the ballroom and it fell in during a charity auction. I wished it had happened when we had a salon on so that I could say we literally brought the roof down. But it happened during a charity auction. The ceiling has been repaired.
Yeah.
The ballroom is now functional again. Sentences I didn't think I'd ever utter in my life. The ballroom is now functional again. And so we will be back at the Savoy. And as you've been kind enough to tune in, I will tell you that our next salon at the Savoy will be October the 18th.
Hooray!
I think I'm right in saying that it is October the 18th. I'm just going to look off camera to our brilliant producer Megan. Megan, is it October the 18th? Yes, it's October the 18th. So put the date in your diary and tickets will go on sale sometime in the month or two before, and we'll let you know soon who it is. So there you go. That is happening then. Before that, we have a salon on June the 23rd at the Theatre Royal in Brighton, which is just a gorgeous wee jewel box of a theatre. If you haven't been, it's just so lovely, isn't it? It's red, it's velvet, and it's kind of faded, but you know, not health and safety dangerous faded, you know, just charmingly faded. And I love it, and I love being on the stage there. You look out and you just see all these lovely, shiny, happy faces.
And it feels quite intimate, even though it's a big gig.
It's quite a lot of people. It's like, what, 1,000 people, something like that. So we've done salons there with Armistead Maupin and Natalie Haynes and Mary Beard, and our salon on June the 23rd is with Tracy Thorne, she of Everything But the Girl and memoirist extraordinaire, and the brilliant Dustin Lance Black, he of Milk, who has written a memoir called Mama's Boy. And they're going to be talking about outsider voices, telling your own story, all that sort of memoir type stuff, which I obviously love.
Sounds great.
So we're going to be doing that. There will be crying. Will you cry?
I will definitely cry.
Yeah, good. We might have to work on the eye makeup crying situation.
Yeah.
I don't want your fabulousness to suddenly melt. So anyway, so that's from the 23rd. October the 18th, and then the other thing, which is very exciting, which you may have seen, I think you may have seen because seemingly everybody did, is that the salon's going to be a TV series. Yay!
Which is amazing.
It's amazing.
And when's that all going to happen?
That's a good question, because I feel like I don't know when it's all going to happen, because I don't know when we're going to fit it all in, but it's being commissioned by BBC Scotland, and the people who are making it are IWC Media, and they make Location and Gogglebox and stuff like that, so they're quite good. And yeah, we might become the Phil and Kirsty of books. Who
Excellent.
knows? I could see that happening for us. But anyway, so that's going to be happening, and what's brilliant about that is that it means books are on telly, which they just aren't enough books on telly at all. Makes me really annoyed that books are somehow neglected. You know, we've got sport coming out of our goals, and you know, we just don't have enough books on telly. So we're bringing books back to telly. That's going to start happening in the autumn. The focus is on Scottish books and Scottish writers, but we're going to have writers from all around the world and books from across the UK and all around the world as well. So it's going to be as diverse as the salon is, I'm proud to say, and it will be on BBC Scotland, which you can get on your digital telly, and it will be on iPlayer as well, so you'll be able to watch it wherever you are, and we'll be confirming the guests soon, and I'm very, very, very excited about it. I might wear my kilt. That's how excited
Please do.
I'm about it. Anyway, so that's just a lot of salon news, and I suppose the other thing to say in addition to that is that I'm still touring with my novel, which I will be touring with, it seems, for the next 2 years, and it's just been worldwide. It's just been a book at bedtime on Radio 4, and you can catch the podcast version of that with Tracy Ann Oberman. Did you hear any of it? Have you heard it yet?
Yes, and it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's just awesome to hear it out there so soon after it was published. That also seems amazing.
Yeah, but it was just kind of very quick. I know.
Yeah.
You've read the book and you've heard the abridgment. What did you think about the way that was done?
I would rather have the whole thing.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I think they did it very sensitively and cleverly.
Yeah.
So I think it worked.
Yeah.
But I would definitely recommend anyone that hears the abridgment to then read the whole thing as well, because there's so much in the book that you miss.
I read the script when it got sent to me, and I just was like, I couldn't believe how much of the book they managed to put in, but also leave out, and yet it still worked.
Yes, it becomes a play.
It becomes a play, basically, yeah. And Tracy Ann did a fantastic job. She's an amazing actor. But we're going to come on to talk about audiobooks in a minute, because that's something you feel very passionately about. So anyway, to today's discussion, The Art of Mindful Reading, Ella's beautiful book. Look at that, extreme close up. It is a gorgeous book, and you told me that the company that published it is based in Brighton.
Yes, Leaping Hare Books.
Yeah.
They are a really lovely company who are not far from here, and they're quite a small but jewel-like company. All their books are beautiful. They're mostly hardbacks. They're mostly about mindfulness, and also they do a lot of books about science. They do beautiful books about insects and whales and reptiles and all kinds of things, but every book is gorgeous.
Yes, they're gorgeous books, and they're doing good things in the world. We'll come to talk about the book in a second. Let's start off with talking about bibliotherapy, because I've known you for a long time. I've had a bibliotherapy session.
Yes.
In fact, I've had 2 bibliotherapy sessions over the years. And you do bibliotherapy sessions. I'm due overdue. Clearly I'm in need of medical intervention. You've been doing them at the salons for years. So, but for people who don't know what bibliotherapy is, or who are perhaps sceptical of what it is, can you explain?
Bibliotherapy is the art of prescribing fiction to cure life's ailments. So anyone that loves books will benefit from reading the right book at the right time in their life. So it is an art which doesn't necessarily work well for people that don't like reading, but they can be persuaded in various ways to read. So even non-book lovers can have bibliotherapy sessions and find different ways of approaching books, like audiobooks or reading aloud, which we'll talk about more later. But so bibliotherapy mostly is all about getting to know someone really well in an hour, and then finding out what they love about books, what they hate about books, what they love reading, what they don't like reading, where, how and what they read, and then prescribing them the perfect book to read at this time in their life, depending on what's happening in their life, whether it's a particular issue they have, whether they're...
Like what?
Well, it could be that they are at a career juxtaposition, that they're having a crisis in their career and they don't know what to do next, or that they're retiring and thinking they've got 20, 30 years to live. What are they going to do? What should they read to inspire them or give them solace?
Books. Very, very long. Yes, just keep reading Wolf Hall over and The Goldfinch. Have you read The Goldfinch? So are those 2 of the most common reasons why somebody would come and see you? So they're having a kind of career anxiety, or they're retiring, and it's about kind of a life phase, basically.
Yes, so that's very common. Also, deciding whether to have kids or not.
Really?
Yes, that's quite a big common ailment that we encounter. and also being on the verge of parenthood, knowing that you are going to have kids, and realising that your life is going to be turned upside down. So wanting to read books that might help with that. Also,
so not we need to talk about Kevin at that point, probably.
That would be
you wouldn't be prescribing
really
that at that point. What would you prescribe though for somebody who was about to have kids and was thinking, you know?
I Don't Know How She Does It
Right.
by Alison Pearson, which is hilarious and makes you feel actually guilt-free because she does have such a bad time being a mum and having a career and trying to balance it all and doesn't succeed, and it's really funny. So that's a really good one. There's also a brilliant book called The Last Samurai by Helen DeWitt, which is all about a single mother who spends most of her life going around the circle line, being really depressed.
Right.
And her son becomes a total genius, and they actually have a really lovely relationship, and it's all about his search for a father figure. And that's a really kind of optimistic yet realistic book. Also, Hey Yeah Right, Get a Life by Helen Simpson. That's short stories, which is really funny again and all about motherhood in a very intimate way. Probably not Rachel Cusk.
Yes, probably not the most inspiring in that particular circumstance.
No, frankly, would put any new mother off.
What would you, I mean, do you ever feel when somebody comes to you that actually they need to go and see another kind of therapist, or maybe seek some other kind of professional help?
Yes,
that
has happened a few times in my career when someone's come and told me something really awful, whether it's a terrible life crisis that they've had or that they're actually schizophrenic or suicidal. And in those instances I do need to refer them to someone else.
To get other support.
But I'll always offer additional support through bibliotherapy, and generally those people will go off and find the extra support but then come back and have bibliotherapy as well, so that's really nice. And then I can work sometimes with a therapist on the side, and I'm kind of like an extra therapy.
I think that when I think about books that have helped me in my life, there are definite books that I found at the right time that have got me through stuff. So I think that Tales of the City, when I read those books as a gay teenager who had never read a book where gay people were happy, where gay people had friends, where gay people had jobs and lives, and those books by Armstead Maupin, they definitely helped me at that point in my life, and got me through stuff I didn't even know I was necessarily feeling at the time. So that would be a book and that's a book that I often recommend. I'm not in a position to prescribe, but that I will often give to people. So I can definitely think of lots of books that have helped me. Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking helped me when I was grieving.
That's a fantastic book, which I do often prescribe to people who've been bereaved. And that's quite a intense book, which doesn't work for everyone. I think some people, when they're recently bereaved, need to read just pure escapism, and actually, surprisingly, they just want to read crime or detective fiction or something that will take them out of it totally. But then I find with that book it's quite good a few months down the line when you've accepted the death, but you are prepared to analyse your feelings in great depth. And I think that book is brilliant for that.
I mean, it's a very slight book, but it's incredibly powerful. And I think it was one of the interesting functions that fiction can perform is that it's actually very distressing, but it offers a catharsis.
Yes.
It offers you a way of dealing with pain and seeing somebody else's pain and knowing also that there is a possibility of an afterwards.
Yes.
At least that's what it offered me. I think it's really interesting, the idea of giving the right book to the right person at the right time and understanding that it's tailored and specific, which is the way physical medicine is moving as well, actually, isn't it? Drugs and treatments are becoming much more targeted to individual genomes and individual people, and bibliotherapy should be too.
Yes, But then I also don't want to deny the idea of serendipity in finding the right book at the right time, because that does happen. Like with you found Armistead when you needed him.
Yeah.
And I think as a teenager, you stumble across books in which you suddenly discover yourself.
Yeah.
And luckily now there's so many more brilliant young adult books, particularly which are gay and
offering different kinds of representation.
Exactly.
Different kinds of lives. And I think the thing about serendipity is, though, that we can only have serendipity if we've got independent bookshops, if we've got libraries, if we've got schools that have got books on offer. You know, to discover books, you have to be able to physically put your hands on them. In that way, well, I'm not talking about sort of stumbling upon stuff online, but you know, I think that serendipity it can't just happen. We need to be watchful, I think, and vigilant. As book lovers and as citizens of protecting those spaces so that people can have those moments of discovery. So let's talk about the art of mindful reading. Now, when I picked it up, I was like, oh God, things with mindfulness slightly make my bum curl. I do feel a bit chai latte about mindfulness. I do. But I opened the book and I didn't have to persevere with the prose at all, because as usual it's beautifully written. And as somebody who can't live without books about books are one of my favourite things. Books about books are so meta, and I just love them. It's like thinking about what you're going to cook while you're eating your lunch, what you're going to cook for dinner while you're eating your lunch. I'm that kind of cook, and I'm that kind of reader. So, but what is mindful reading for those who might be thinking it's a bit chai latte?
Well, I also had your feeling when I was asked to write the book, because mindfulness is something which has overcome the nation in many ways, and people are constantly talking about it, and it can be interpreted in so many different ways that I did feel quite sceptical myself. But in my view, mindful reading is all about attentiveness, and that for me is also what mindfulness is really, is being attentive to moments in a very deliberate fashion. So with reading, you can be mindful and attentive of the reading process. So it is a bit of a paradox, because when you read, you get lost in a book. And you could argue that that's the exact opposite of mindfulness. But what I think is that you can be mindful while reading in two different ways. One, you can be very attentive to the fact that you have been lost in a book, so you can let yourself be lost in a book.
Be conscious of the fact that you're escaping into it.
Of it. Yes. So you can allow yourself to drift into it, but you can also be slightly stepping back and observing yourself doing that, which is a very valuable thing to do. And it's a kind of double think, which is very useful. And also, once you've lost yourself in the book and gone down that tunnel, then you can come back and reconsider that process and think, what exactly happened there? Why did I get lost? How did I get lost? And what were the processes I went through emotionally and even physically to some extent? So there's that side of it, which is the getting lost. But then there's also the side of it, which is being very attentive to the physical reality of reading. So feeling the book, feeling the texture of it, loving the paper, reading the words, seeing the words, thinking about the words themselves. So there's so many different ways of looking at it. That's why there's a lot of different chapters going into all those different aspects.
I think what I noticed when, I watch huge amounts of telly, and I think we're in a golden age of the sort of novelistic television and the narrative of TV shows, and funnily enough, I'm just watching Tales of the City. But I think that telly calls upon our attention in a different way than reading, and I have noticed since I spent not so much more time with television but more time with Twitter and social media, my attention is definitely more fragmented. And I don't want to enable that by sort of turning to short stories or flash fiction. I actually find myself yearning for longer reads and more connection with deeper books, bigger worlds. I think that I can lose myself in. But just when I was reading this book about reading mindfully, I felt myself slow down. I read it under a tree in the park near my house, and which I saw was one of your tips later on, so I felt very good. But I felt my pulse slow down, and I felt the things that had been bothering me, that had been annoying me, recede. And because I was reading a book about reading mindfully, I became conscious that actually those are benefits that I take for granted of reading that I don't get from watching television particularly, or listening to music. I enjoy watching telly, I enjoy listening to music, but reading gives me those kind of physical, almost mental benefits in a way that I hadn't recognised. And I know there's lots of research done about that. And I read in your book that the ancient Greeks built their hospitals next to their theatres.
Yes, they really knew what they were doing.
Yeah,
which is pretty amazing.
Because they knew that they knew about the benefits, health benefits.
Yes, because they were big believers in catharsis.
Yeah.
And the fact that you could purge yourself of emotions.
Yeah.
When you needed to, in order to become healed.
Yeah.
So they believed that it was just as important to heal your mind as it was to heal your body.
Yeah.
And therefore, having a theatre next to a hospital made absolute sense.
Yeah.
So they were really early practices of bibliotherapy, which when Susan and I started the bibliotherapy service back in 2008, we thought we'd invented it. We were like, yes, bibliotherapy, this is the thing that we just thought of.
Yeah.
And then we realised, to our slight embarrassment, that actually it's been going on for 2,000 years.
Yeah. And let's talk about auditory, visual and kinesthetic readers, which are the three styles of readers that you identify. Can you tell us a bit about them?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting exercise to go through, to read a passage from a book and observe yourself while reading it in a mindful way. And as you read, notice whether you are saying the words aloud in your head, or even hearing the words in someone else's voice maybe, or in your own voice, or visualising exactly what's happening, and so seeing it in a quite cinematic fashion, or feeling it in a movement way. So those three different types of reading are audio, so hearing it, visual, when you totally envisage it like a film, or feeling it in terms of movement, which would be kinesthetic.
Do most people fall into one category or the other?
I think most people are visual on the whole, but you do sometimes witness people reading who literally mouth the words, and they're definitely audio. Yeah. And there's a lot of people, maybe it's nearly half actually, probably about 40%, who hear the voice of a reader in their heads, and it's normally their own voice.
Because I was hearing that and I was thinking I couldn't cope with that if I heard the voice of myself reading aloud in my head, and I was fascinated to learn that people actually do that, because I just sort of rather arrogantly assumed that everybody read the same way that I read, which is that I visualise what's happening in my head. It's happening in my head, but then I was thinking about how I write, and how I write is auditory. I read everything that I write aloud lots of times before I share it with anybody else, and it has to scan properly in my head, and it has to rhyme, and it all has to fit together in the right way.
So even when you first write it, do you hear it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I do, but I see it when I read other people's stuff. I see it.
Yes.
I'm much more visual in that way. So I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I think that's because in a way you are a professional reader. You're used to absorbing the words so fast, which people who love reading mostly do, that it's sort of like it's just a stream going into your brain, and
that's
you
how
don't
it feels.
Notice the words.
That's how it feels, definitely. I'm like absorbed. If I was judging books for a prize and I had to read a book a day for a month or something like that, you just kind of inhale the books and then go back and think about the language, the word choice, the structure, the architecture of it, whereas the beginning is about a feeling and about a visual. But I was thinking about audiobooks. Now, you love audiobooks, don't you?
I do.
Do you really listen to like 100 a year?
Yes, I do have a big Audible account. I feel responsible for keeping them going practically. But now
when do you do it? When do you listen to
all
them?
The time. So, to the detriment sometimes of my family, I've always got an audiobook on. It's literally in my pocket. People know where I am in the house because they hear somebody reading aloud.
Really?
Yeah. And so it's when I'm doing the washing up, laundry, driving, all domestic chores, I'm accompanied by an audiobook.
What is it you like about them so much? What do you love about them?
I get lost in the story in the way that you do when you read a book.
Yeah.
And it's a way that I can multitask.
Right.
Because I'm also a painter, so I spend a lot of time painting at a canvas. That's when I can do both jobs at the same time. I can be a bibliotherapist and read and also paint. So it was a practical necessity that led me to it first, of trying to do lots of things at the same time.
At the same time.
And then I became more and more addicted. And now I'm so used to listening to audiobooks that I actually find it quite hard to sit still and read.
That's so interesting. The bibliotherapist is having to challenge yourself to sit down and read rather than be doing more than one thing at the same time.
Yeah.
What about abridged audiobooks?
I have forgiven myself for listening to abridgments. I used to be a massive snob and think, no, never listen to an abridgment.
I must have all 42 hours of War and Peace or whatever.
Exactly. But then one day I was trying to read hard. Yes. And I thought, I just can't handle that. So I thought I'd try the abridgment, which was only 6 hours. And it was a great story, and I really enjoyed it, and it was really well read.
And you got something from it, you loved it, and then did you then go and read the book, or you felt
not
yet? Okay.
Guilt, very guilty.
But I don't think people should feel guilty about it. I mean, and I wanted to ask you about this actually, because I see it all the time on Instagram or Twitter, people talking about their guilty reading pleasures, and I just think, why would you ever feel guilty about reading anything? And it's just so judgmental, because it's usually fiction by women or for women that people feel guilty about, and that gives me the pure rage. Sorry, I'm just being a little mini rant to myself, but do people ask you about that? Do they ever sort of say, oh, can you recommend some guilty pleasures for me, or do you have any guilty pleasures?
Actually, that's not something that's I've been asked of my own guilty pleasures, which is an interesting idea, which I'm going to have to think about. But for prescribing to other people, I do actually really love a bit of chick lit and a bit of sci-fi occasionally. I grew up reading the old Mills and Boon.
Me too. Which is why I'm very romantic and believe that doctors and nurses always end up together, of all genders and everything else. Seriously, but no, I mean, I think they did make me romantic. But I do not like that term, and if I catch myself using it, I want to vanquish it.
And actually, graphic novels possibly used to be in that category for me as well. I used to think, ooh, this is a bit of a guilty pleasure reading a graphic novel, but actually, graphic novels are now. One thing, they're so different now, and they're so rich and diverse and brilliant that they're as demanding and fantastic as any decent literary fiction.
Talk to me about Dear Time.
That is a wonderful thing that happens in schools in the south of England, sadly not universally around the whole of the UK. It stands for Drop Everything and Read, and every day at schools in Sussex and many places around here, all the kids at, I think it's 2:00, have to drop what they're doing and read a book. So they have to have a book on them in order to do that. So that's part of the idea that they will bring a book to school with them.
What about kids who can't get books at school? I mean, how are they provided for?
They use the school library, so the teachers do make sure
every kid's got a book.
That every kid has a book, and they will make sure that they are directed to the right book in the school library. Though having said that, that is a utopian dream, and obviously not every school is always brilliant at it, but that's the theory. So I've witnessed that and think it's wonderful, and they read for 20 minutes and then they go back to normal lessons. And I feel everyone should do that in the world.
So I should just stop talking to you right now and just
yes.
read. I might do that in a minute.
I would not be offended.
I wonder if we've got any questions on our tablet. We have. Look at that. Here we go. How funny that you should be talking serendipity just as I came on. Thank you, Tobias Steed. Kirsty, who works with the Salon, is our producer. Hi Kirsty, you're watching, I'm very glad. Kirsty says, does Ella suggest books for children? For example, if parents are divorcing?
Yes, I do have a rather wonderful volume, The Story Cure, which has ailments for children and the books that might help them. And I'm actually just going to quickly look up what we've got for divorce, which is under parents who are splitting up. The thing with this book is it's for all different ages, so there are different cures for different ages.
Okay, of course.
Sorry, it's just going to take me a minute to find it. But
I like that you've got embarrassing parents, which is basically all parents, obviously. Parents too busy, I see that.
Yes, exactly.
Parents who are listening to audiobooks instead of talking to their children, is there a special?
That's my kids.
So parents who are splitting up, okay.
So we've got 2 books here, which are picture books, and one's called Two Homes, and one's called Living with Mum and Living with Dad. So they're actually both really lovely picture books. Then we've also got books for older children, such as there's a really lovely one called The Unwedding by Babette Cole, which is actually a very funny book about parents splitting up who decide to have an unwedding, which becomes a really joyous occasion when they're getting divorced.
My parents did not do that. My parents really didn't do that, which you may have read about in my best-selling award-winning memoir, Maggie and Me.
There's also an excellent book by Judy Blume. It's Not Judy. The End of the World.
I've not read that one.
It's so good, which is about parents splitting up, and it's actually really sad, but it also shows that there is life for the child beyond the splitting of her home, and it's really well done.
Judy Blume is one of the most banned authors in the world. Did you know that?
Yeah, it seems amazing, doesn't it?
Because of Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret.
And Forever.
And Forever. Seriously. Right, another question. This is a message from a viewer called Colleen. What would Ella recommend for sleepless nights? And then she says, how can one get more out of the story to get into the mindful state? But should we go with the sleepless nights first? I mean, are you just prescribing really boring things there? Or are you thinking about rhythm? What's going to lull somebody to sleep?
One of the books that we recommend in the Novel Cure is a book called The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa, which is written in a very dreamlike way. So it's kind of fragmentary text, which is very beautiful and very thought-provoking, and it does give you a sense of falling asleep. So it sort of makes your eyelids flutter with the sheer strangeness of the fragments. So that's a cure that uses the style of writing. But a couple of other thoughts would be to listen to audiobooks, because lots of people find that very soothing. And I do have clients who regularly listen to childhood books, which they have in a kind of sleeping pillow, which you can attach a phone into, where the voice comes as if from the middle of the pillow in a slightly disturbing way. But that is a real thing.
Is it?
It's a sort of audiobook pillow.
Audiobook pillow? I've never heard of this now. Can you drool on it and not be electrocuted? I'm a big drooler when it comes to
You
the
can. It's designed with that in mind.
With that in mind.
So the technology is sort of at the bottom.
Oh my God, what if people chose to start playing erotic novels and that? That's another disturbing level of thought for them. What happened to that pillow? Anyway, let's not go. Well, I've gone there. I can't not ungo there. I have gone there, but I'm sure they've thought of all of these. I'm sure they've thought of all of these eventualities.
Yes, I'm sure they have.
I'm sure they have.
So that's another way of dealing with sleeplessness, is having the soothing voice of an audiobook reader, and particularly maybe a soothing book which you know from childhood.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with the story, and
Yes.
that takes you back into hopefully a place of comfort and safety in childhood.
If I'm having trouble sleeping, which I don't often have actually, I have to say I'm quite lucky in that regard, but I reread Map and Lucia, because I know those books inside out, and they're so cosy and lovely and warm, and I know exactly what's going to happen, and they're funny, and that kind of like sort of gentle way that makes me relax. And I really like those.
So they're your comfort books in a way.
Yeah, they're some of my comfort books. Yes, they definitely are. And they're so well observed, and that they're intelligent and funny. But yeah, they get me relaxed. I would never, they're not gonna wind me up.
Going back to sleeplessness, though, another cure is perhaps to just go with the fact that you're an insomniac and enjoy reading in the middle of the night, reading through the night, because I know that might be an annoying thing to say, but in some instances, if you're awake at 4 a.m, there's nothing better than actually getting into a fantastic book and reading till 7.
Well, I mean, I agree with you about that. Sadly, not everybody's lives are as privileged or as flexible as that. But actually, there is a lot of evidence, isn't there, to suggest that the way that we sleep is, very, very much to do with the Industrial Revolution and not actually how people are. And that you should. What's that hour called? The hour between 3 and 4. There's a Chinese novel about it. What's it called?
I don't know.
It's got a great name. But anyway, it's to do with an hour in the night where people often would get up and do something, or they would use that hour for other purposes in bed other than sleeping. But there's a name for that hour. If you're watching and you know what that name of that hour is, please tell us. Because you're probably much more clever than we are, and what that book is as well, I cannot remember. But anyway, I like the idea of just go with it. Just don't try and sleep. Just crack on with your.
I think if you can do that every now and then, that's a real luxury.
It is.
Yeah.
That takes me back to being a teenager completely. I spent so many nights as a teenager just reading all the way through the night and then going to school the next day.
And not feeling awful.
I'm not feeling awful. But then probably sleeping for sort of 24 hours straight, which is something I can still do every now and then if I'm given the chance. Alright, well, it's nearly time for us to wrap up. I just want to say thank you to Ella for The Art of Mindful Reading, which is very inspiring. If you've got a book lover in your life, and you obviously have because you're watching this and you're not a monster, I would recommend it because it's very encouraging at making you feel like you can approach big books or intimidating books, that you can also fit reading into your life. It recommends just finding 6 minutes maybe at lunchtime, actually putting reading into your diary like you might put going to the gym or going to the dentist or going to the supermarket or whatever else, actually structuring reading into your life, which weirdly unspontaneous and unsexy as that sounds, I actually think can work incredibly well, making time for reading in your life. So anyway, it's a great book, and if you're lucky, you might get an appointment with Ella at one of our next salons.
Yes.
Ella will be there.
Book through Facebook, can't you?
Yeah, you can book.
Yeah.
You can book Ella through Facebook.
Yeah.
And she'll be there. It's all in confidence.
Absolutely.
I've never, ever convinced her to tell me anything about any of our clients, and I have really tried.
I would divulge nothing.
Nothing. She won't. It's horrible. She's a terribly good keeper of secrets. That's as it should be. But anyway, thank you for being here today, Ella.
Thank you, Damian.
And thank you for watching us on our Facebook Live. I might see some of you on June 23rd in Brighton with our salon with Tracy Thorne and Dustin Lance Black. And we will be back in the Savoy on October the 18th with a fantastic salon there. And at some point, we'll be on your telly. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Have a lovely day.